Greetings, students. I hope you all are well rested and well prepared for the departmental qualifying exams that is going to take place soon. This video is going to go over some of the concepts that you need to be clear about and make sure that you're well prepared as you are studying for your comps. The four sections that I am looking at and going over in this video, the four sections are PPOL 714, 720, 716, and 718, which is foundations in public policy, policy analysis, um, political philosophy, and political and social institutions. Before I start off with the video on talking about the things that you need to know in order to be prepared for the departmental comprehensives, I want to take a moment and talk about the fact that you need to be overall for all these sections, you need to be well versed with the domestic issues that are relevant to today's society, kind of being current with what is happening right now in this country is very important for you, not only for these sections but for overall all the sections that you will be taking as part of the qualifying exams for the PhD in public policy program. I would ask that you read the Washington Post, New York Times, Politico, the Atlantic, Brookings Institution, Pew Charitable Trust reports, and any other reputable places that would have reports and policy pieces and information about current news and events that's taking place in today's society is going to be important for you. Questions will, of course, be application based, so you need to kind of keep that in mind as you are preparing for your comprehensive exams for your sections. You should be prepared to take these core concepts and that you have learned and to be able to apply them to current events that are taking place in today's society. So it is important for you to be able to bridge the gap between theory and practice in this comprehensive examination that you'll be taking. So I'm going to go section by section. I'm going to start off with foundations of public policy. As it relates to the foundations of public policy section, you need to understand the policy process and that you need to be aware of the problem identification, agenda setting, policy formulation, policy legitimization, policy implementation, and policy evaluation components of the policy making process. So you need to know and you need to be aware of and well versed with the various steps involved in the policy making process. You need to understand how each of these components of the policymaking process work and what do each of these components mean, how does it function and work in the policy arena in the United States of America. So, how each of these steps of the policymaking process are not only individually important, but are interconnected, and how they work is going to be very important for you to know. You need to understand the concept of market failures in the United States and how market failures is what causes the government then to intervene and to come up with policy solutions. Understand the various factors that lead to market failures, such as externalities, information asymmetry, monopolies. These are all the things that cause market failures. So understand the various factors that lead to market failures, what these factors are, and how each of these factors actually compel the government then to be involved in order to correct the market failure of the private sector. In understanding your foundations and your policy making process, it is going to be important for you to also be well versed with the tragedy of commons. I know that the tragedy of commons is something that you probably have read in the macro micro sections of the economics portion of your study here, but understanding that tragedy of commons and how it actually relates to the policymaking process is going to be important for you for 714. You need to understand how this tragedy relates to the policy process as a whole and as it relates to each of the parts of the policymaking process. You need to be aware of the various actors who are involved in the policymaking process. We need to know what the role is of each of these actors, because actors are not only the institutions such as Congress, presidency, or the judicial branch, but it's also other actors are involved, such as the bureaucracy, such as interest groups, such as media, such as people. So you need to understand what the various actors are who are involved in the policy making process. You need to know the role that each of these actors play in the policy making process. Be familiar with how policies are formulated, know the factors involved in policy formulation, understand the dynamics of policy implementation to know that these decisions are not made in a vacuum. There are many actors that come into play as each of these decisions roll out. Who are the actors involved and what role do they play at each of these steps of the policymaking process is going to be very important for you to know. You need to also understand the role of bureaucracy in the policymaking process. There are two components at the very end of the policymaking process, which is policy formulation and policy legitimization. How are they two different from one another? What happens in those areas and who all are involved in legitimization and formulation process is going to be important. So that is a little bit about, PPUL 714 foundations. Now let me shift to PPUL 720, which is policy analysis. In policy analysis, you need to know the various steps that are involved in policy analysis, and we discussed that greatly in our classroom sessions. Understand that the very first step to policy analysis is that of problem identification. And problem identification is important because different people, we've talked about, view the problem very differently. And the government has a compelling need to view problems from the lens of what is good for the people. And so understand the challenges that are involved in in problem identification and the role that it plays in the policymaking process and the policy analysis process. Be able to engage in critical thinking about different policy alternatives that can be designed to address a problem. Be able to develop the criteria that's needed in order to engage in policy analysis. Remember that when we're developing criteria for policy analysis, criteria have to be quantifiable. Example is if I design a policy to install extra phone lines in my office, then the criteria to make sure that the deliverables would be met could be that, everyone who's answering the phone lines now should be, no customer should wait for more than, two rings. And that's a criteria. That criteria is quantifiable because now when we are, evaluating the policy, if the customers have waited for 5 rings, then we know that our goal is not being met. So the criteria kind of sets out what the deliverables are and gives us a way to measure those deliverables. So we talked about, those in class as well. So what are these criteria and for each of the policies that you are analyzing or you're proposing? Policy alternatives come with various costs associated with it. And one thing that you need to be aware of is cost is not always necessarily dollars. When we're talking about cost benefit analysis, you know, I want to think I want you all to think about the more broader aspect of costs involved, and in that we are looking at the economic cost, the political cost, and the social cost that's involved. What are those kind of costs involved in policy analysis? Also, what are the kind of social, economic, and political support that policies need in order to push it and in order to gain legitimization? You need to be aware of, understanding that as an aspect. Lastly, when analyzing policy, you must be able to pick, from the list of policies you have, one policy, and you must be able to justify as to why you picked that policy, and in that justification, of course, you are going to be talking about, how this policy, even though it might have some challenges, will be able to garner social support, economic support, political support. How it might be easy to win and to have buy-in with certain groups of individuals. So those are things that are going to be important for you in the section of policy analysis. The next section I want to pivot into is going to be political philosophy, which is PPUL 716. And in looking at political philosophy, you would need to know about, the various theories as it relates, or the various foundational philosophies as it relates to political philosophy and public policy. And that is, things like liberalism, libertarianism, conservatism are some of the principles that you need to be aware of. For purposes of our exam, you also need to be aware of social contract theorists such as Rousseau, such as John Locke, and what social contract theory is and what it means. You need to understand and have a working knowledge of how each of these components, such as libertarianism, liberalism, conservatism, and even social contract, how can we apply these aspects to today's society, to an event, to a situation that is taking place domestically within our country? How can some of these theories be applied, and what role do they play in impacting public policy, so to speak, is going to be very important for you all. You need to know what the role of government is in invoking these theories, especially the social contract theory. So, what is the social contract theory? What role does the government play in making sure that it meets its side of the contract? And what role do people play in making sure that people are abiding by this contract? You need to understand what distributive justice and restorative justice and public policy means. In that, you're looking at the role that justice plays in today's society as a beacon of public policy making. Understand utilitarian theory is going to be important. Utilitarianism talks about the greatest good for the greatest number. How does that apply to the democratic principles? So, in that, then it becomes important for you also to know what the democratic values of today's society is in America. Some of the values are like equality, freedom, pragmatism. These are just some of the values. But what are the values that are important to America as it makes public policy? Because our public policy making has to reflect these values within the policymaking arena. The next section that I would like to look at is that of public PPOL 718, which is the political and social institutions. In this section, what you would need to know is the political institutions that form the core of United States government. And when we're talking about the political institutions, we're talking about the various institutions, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, to understand what role each of these institutions play in the policy-making processes. What are the powers that each of these institutions have in the policy-making process? Know again the democratic principles that are there and values that are important for the United States, as a unit, and what are these fundamental values, and how do they translate to our political and social institutions is going to be important. Know the various social institutions involved in policymaking process. So, for example, political parties, interest groups, media, bureau- um, uh, bureaucracy are some of those social political institutions that are involved in the policymaking process. Understand what these various institutions are, understand the role that each of these institutions play, and understand how these institutions are bound by these democratic principles and values that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Understand the role of political parties, interest groups, media, and the society. We as people, what role do we play in the policy making and the policy implementation arena and in the policy process in general? Understand the challenges involved as it relates to political and social institutions within the arena of policymaking, and also know the opportunities that are involved in the political and social institutions arena when it comes to policymaking. So these are some of the things that you need to be aware of as you prepare for your comprehensive exams. Again, in order to, this is an application-based exam, so it is going to be important for you to not only know the concepts, but also understand how to translate that concepts and apply them into the current events that are taking place in this country. So again, I would implore you not only to read up on the concepts, but also have a broad understanding of some of the hot topics in this country, and the policy arena around those things are going to be important for you to have a general knowledge as well, so that when you are attempting these questions, you are engaging in them from an educated point of view. I wish you all the best, and I know that each one of you will do tremendously well. I wish you success, and happy studying.